guys, Ashley Cheeks here with Pitch Investors Live to educate you on how to pitch perfectly to investors. Today's topic is part 3 in the pitching series. We're going to talk about how to have the perfect structure by having the perfect answers to the 5 most critical questions that investors will ask you during your pitch. The reason why this topic is so important is because most entrepreneurs, as they prepare for their pitch, they make a fatal mistake. And that mistake is that they rehearse their pitch so diligently that they are not prepared for any other questions that the investor presents. You can never fully predict everything that's going to come out of a pitch, but one thing you have to be very careful of is not listening as you talk to your investor. It is a dialogue first and foremost. It's not simply you regurgitating your pitch, your features, your benefits of your product or service. It really is a discussion. So you need to make sure that you authenticate every question from the investor by repeating it back to them and making sure you heard it correctly, and then giving them a direct answer. So if they ask you, what is my value proposition? You do not respond with all of the features and benefits of your product or service. You answer with, oh, my value proposition is XYZ. So you want to make sure that you're listening and that you're giving very focused, direct answers, and try not to keep jumping back into the scripted pitch that you may have prepared for yourself. Because if you do, you will annoy your investor, you'll be disrespectful, and you're going to put off a very negative vibe that you don't know how to take a simple conversation and make something great out of it. If you're like most entrepreneurs, you probably up to this point have been practicing for that investor moment by watching pitches on Pitch Investors Live. You might also be watching pitches on Shark Tank or at local pitching events. All of that is excellent. One of the things you might have noticed is that every pitch is a little bit different. They don't seem to follow the same framework pitch to pitch, and the reason for this is it's not about the structure of your pitch that makes it successful. It's all about how you answer the core questions, and we're going to go over the 5 core questions today. The first question you need to have answered is, what is the problem that you're solving today? Your business was likely born out of a great need in the market, and you need to make sure that that need is clearly stated in your pitch right up front. A lot of entrepreneurs go down the path of getting way too hung up on the fact that they have a great solution, and they forget to frame up the problem nice and neatly for investors before they go into that solution. Now, when you talk about your problem to investors, you want to make sure that you're explaining to them how you've proven this problem exists. Do not get caught up in the everybody needs this and everybody is always asking for this. Try not to do anything vague in that manner. Make sure you can come to them and say there is a clear demand for the market because, and explain to them how you beta tested this in a way that proves demand. It's not enough to just say that you've heard a lot of people complain about something or that it's crossed your mind that a lot of people would need something. You really need to bring proof to the table that there is an actual need and that it's backed up by data or some kind of information that validates the fact that this is a problem that exists and people are willing to pay for the solution that accompanies that problem. The second part that you need to make sure you have ready to go for your investor in your perfect pitch is to make sure that your problem is now addressed by your solution cleanly. You do not want to jump around and talk about the problem of the market and then talk about solutions that are out there and then talk about your solution and then talk about the problem again. You want to make sure that it's linearly focused. So do not start talking about your solution, your product, your service, your business until you've outlined exactly to the investor what the problem is that your business addresses. This is going to help tell the story to the investor in a clear way so they can follow you nicely throughout the conversation. You want to get away from the idea that you have to pitch yourself first and talk about yourself and your background. You really need to talk about the business first. Now, I want to give you a word of caution here. As you introduce your solution to the market, be careful not to go too broad in all of the areas that your business could address. You don't want to talk about all of the avenues that you could go down with your business because it's a little bit too early in the discussion to go into that. You really want to focus on the one core market that your business is targeting first and foremost and make that the focal point of your conversation. You can talk later on when you're on more amicable terms with the investor about different routes the business could take and different directions it could go. But for right now, your core focus is to make sure that the investor sitting across from you clearly understands your business and understands in a very transparent way how your solution directly meets the problem you've already set up for them in the previous statement. The reason why you want to be very careful not to talk too widely and too broadly about the different ways that your product or service could address a market need is because you want to avoid looking like you don't have a clear strategy. There's always a few different ways that you can do something, but what you don't want to do is make it look like you're tackling every market at once. You want to talk about the number one market you want to penetrate first and foremost. You can touch on the idea that you have expansion potential beyond that market. You want to be very, very careful not to go too broad, too fast in that pitch because that time is very limited. You're only going to be able to talk at very, very brief length on the entire business itself, and you don't want to lose any precious minutes talking about things that you're not trying to get funding for today. So keep it focused on today's goals, on today's core next business steps, and that'll keep you focused in the right direction so that the pitch goes in the way that you want it to with that investor. The third question that your pitch needs to answer is, what is your value proposition? This one gets folks really tripped up, and if you've ever seen another pitch on Pitch Investors Live or elsewhere, you've already seen it kind of throws people off when they hear it. Typically, the response is to list out a bunch of features and benefits to the product or service, but that's not what the investor wants to hear. They want to know what is the one thing that creates a unique identifier for your business, and they want to know what different thing that you're doing than anybody else on the market that creates a value proposition for your product, your service, and your business. This relates to how customers see you, and this relates to why the investor would see value in investing in you in particular over a competitor or over another provider. When you answer this question, try to keep it to 1 to 2 things, not beyond that. You don't want to get into the rhythm of listing a whole bunch of things that are great about your business or about your product or service. And keeping it to 1 to 2 things in your value proposition is one of the easiest ways to do this. It'll also keep the conversation focused and on track so that you don't veer off left or right. The fourth thing that you need to have ready to go as you're developing your pitch is what it is that you've already accomplished to date as a business. Your timeline to date is going to be proof to the investor that you are a forward-moving business and that you have a ton of momentum. I've talked about this in previous videos. You do not need to be overly complex with this. Simply talk about the high-level milestones your business has accomplished so far so that your investor can understand and feel security in the idea that you're running this thing very purposefully and that you are driving towards new goals in a very strategic way. You want to make sure that the investor understands clearly that you're not waiting for his or her money. You're taking action now. And the way that you do that is by making sure you talk about all of the things that you're doing with the money you have today, and try not to say that you've been waiting for money to come into the business. That's never a good thing. They don't want to see that you're waiting for anything. They want to see that you're strategically using every minute of every day in a purposeful way so that the business can grow and scale appropriately. One thing you need to remember is that investors are giving you a lot of cash in order to support your business. So to show them that you are responsible and that you know how to manage cash in a great way is to show them how you're currently managing the limited funds that you do have. You want to make sure that they feel comfortable enough to give you more money because you're going to manage it in a way that stretches it and that makes the most use out of it. So you don't want to come in and say that you've already blown $500,000 and you desperately need more money now in order to stay afloat. Instead, you want to talk about all of the great things you've done with limited cash reserves and all the plans that you have for the future on, a variable amount of cash if this investor does or doesn't invest in you today. But you definitely want to give them security that you know how to manage money and you know how to make it work and last. That'll make them feel very, very comfortable that you are the right person to partner with as they grow their own investment portfolio. The fifth question that you need to be ready to answer to investors is, how much money do you need? This one is something that trips entrepreneurs up very frequently, in part because it's partnered with the valuation question. So you have to be able to answer not only how much money you need, but how you got to that amount, and then how much equity you're offering the investor and why that amount of equity makes sense. And that's usually all linked in with your business valuation. If you're wondering about how to properly value your business, you need to make sure that you educate yourself on valuation methods. There's a few different ways that you can value your company. You can do it on revenues, profits, prior sales, projections. You need to make sure that you pick an avenue that makes sense for your company. Once you've picked that method, you can let the investor know, hey, this is based on a revenue projection or a profit projection or an industry benchmark. Whatever that is, you want to make sure it's explainable. From there, you want to make sure that your investor understands that the valuation you put on your business is or isn't based on an equity play. So most entrepreneurs get stuck on the idea that equity is the only thing they can play with. You can talk to an investor about an interest-based loan mixed in with equity. So instead of giving 50% of your company for $50,000, you can say $50,000 to get 10% equity, and then I'll give you a high interest rate in return on the rest of the money. That way you kind of mix it up and you don't have to give away so much of your company in exchange for cash. If the potential for growth is there, and if the investor's portfolio is aligned with what you're doing, they might be very interested in something that has interest plus equity instead of a pure equity play or a pure interest play. Whatever valuation, equity, and asking amount that you put in front of the investor, make sure it all makes sense on paper. Your financial projections in your business plan is the place where you need to make sure everything is mapped out and walked out clearly. If you don't have your business plan finished before you go in front of your investor, make sure you tackle that first. As a business plan consultant, I can tell you 9 times out of 10, I have clients come to me because they need a business plan because they have an investor that's ready to talk to them and they haven't mapped out their scenarios yet to where they know what to ask for. Your asking amount should come from your financials. It should not come off the top of your head. Your financials will walk you to that magic number and you can go to the investor both verbally and in writing with why that number makes sense, as long as you have it forecasted correctly. That's all for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for your time and stay positive, entrepreneurs.